Howdy, and welcome back to the second episode of Home Turf Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Chen.
And I'm Braxton Dore.
And we come to you with heavy hearts after our week one loss against Notre Dame. Well,
it was a rough one.
There's so many things to take away from it. Well, first and foremost, let's get some positives. Power's back. You know, everyone's been asking for it.
Hey, yeah, you have that point. I got the opportunity to actually cover the game in person in the press box, and me and our social media editor, Sophie, were just banking on it, just really hoping that they would bring it back just for the fans, really. Not for the team, not for anything else, but just for the fans, because it was a big moment that, you know, is deserving. Mm-hmm. It's the first walkout song of the year for a squad that we haven't seen before. New coaches, new everything. So I feel like it really set the tone, but didn't deliver throughout the game. What do you think?
It's so much. Well, first of all, you also had ESPN College Game Day in the morning.
Yeah,
a great segment. I watched it on TV. I'm sure it was even better up live.
Yeah.
We obviously had the kicker get $50K after he doubled it with Pat. We had the whole segment with Saban. He was praising us. We had Manziel come back.
You had the entire desk except for Corso's pick. Mm-hmm. Everyone said A&M would win.
Exactly.
And we were very, very far from that.
It's like, there's two sides of it. So first of all, it's like, for me, there's so much hype behind it that, in my opinion, it's like we couldn't lose, right? Because, we had ESPN College Game Day. It was a great time. They picked A&M. Second of all, a 9-time game at A&M. Fourth largest crowd at Kyle Field. Power's back. Third of all, new unis, new helmets, new coaching staff. It's like, this is a kind of a must-win atmosphere. And this is like as a very biased Aggie standpoint, where it's like, oh, you know, we're on top of the world, we can't lose. And then when you come back to reality, you're like, well, Notre Dame is still a top 10 team.
Yeah, and then you lose 23-13, and it's
exactly.
Like,
and then
with one touchdown scored on A&M's side.
God,
I feel like that was the most struggling and frustrating part about the game, was the lack of offense and the lack of offensive really capabilities. It really looked like they couldn't get anything done. I mean, aside for Le'Veon Moss's, you know, production in the run game, which, you know, deserving. He got his snaps. He got 20 carries, almost 70 yards. Like, it's not a bad start for him, but you're kind of wondering, when is that Klein scheme going to really kick in and really going to propel this team past what they had with Jimbo? Because that's the expectation, is to propel past what we've done in past few years. It's the whole reason we fired him. So what do you think was the most frustrating part of the offense, in your opinion?
Well, first off, Weigman's accuracy. Okay, so as much as we, you know, it's still a new system for us. First off, Weigman, he just needs to play better straight up. I mean, the interceptions he had, he overthrows a 6'5", 6'6" Noah Thomas, who's wide open. And that just can't happen.
Well, and what I noticed specifically when I was watching, is that on those two plays, he didn't look anywhere else on the field but to the receiver he threw to. And that was the first major issue I noticed, because he didn't even scan the field. Mm-hmm. He did not. It was very designed, very deliberate that he was going to that one receiver, no matter if he was triple covered or not. Mm-hmm. And that showed up at least 5 more times that I saw. Just me. Sure. And it shows an inexperience. Mm-hmm. And for a guy that you've been wanting to be your starter for 3 years now, it's past that time. It's past that time to focus on experience or not, because at this point, it is a win now. I mean, it is. And I really think that shouldn't fall on the rest of the team. It's got to start with your quarterback, and it's got to start with the person that is leading this A&M team and who has Elko's blessing. Mm-hmm. I mean, Elko, in the press conference post-game, yeah. They admitted to their flaws. They did. And it was something I'd noticed, that it wasn't a common characteristic of the Jimbo organization. Like, that wasn't what he did. He did not own up to his mistakes, and the players under him did not follow suit. That is how you're supposed to treat anything losing in sports. You're supposed to admit to your mistakes, admit what you did wrong, and admit that you're going to try to fix whatever was wrong. And I feel like they did just that at the press conference.
Especially yesterday with Weigman, he said that I was surprised that he even went to meeting in the first place, and I tip my hat off to him. So hopefully it's just a 1 week blunder. Again, he's also coming back from injury.
Yeah,
it's a whole new system. I think what needs to happen is Klein, because his offense at KSU was all about having a dual threat quarterback. having players who blocks for the run and stuff.
Yeah. Oh, it was very run centric, and I agree. And it is a very twist coming to A&M, who is predominantly air raid in the past few years, especially since the production of Manziel and what that brought to how college football could look and how an offensive scheme could look. And I feel like A&M just is not. They haven't found their identity yet on the offensive side. They haven't, and whether that comes in the run game or whether that comes from Wigman himself, like it needs to come together now. It's an urgency thing. If we don't see this before McNeese, you're not going to see the typical A&M team going up against the SEC. You're going to see a very deflated, very unenthusiastic team if they don't get this right.
And it's also not just Wigman, though. In my opinion, it's also the receiving core. I mean,
I agree.
We obviously lost Evan Stewart, and everyone's hyped about people like Terry Bussey, but I mean, Ja'Day Walker was probably the only player or the only receiver that made plays for the A&M receiving core.
He was the most active that night, yes. And it goes back to what they see in practice as well, because all I've heard is that Ja'Day outperforms everyone else in practice, but when it comes to the actual game, it doesn't always look like that. And, you can talk about practice all day long, but it never shows up in the actual game. What you see in the actual game is what you get. And I feel like that receiving core needs to help out their inexperienced quarterback.
Especially Noah Thomas, bro.
Exactly.
You're 6'6", 6'5". He took that leap last year, albeit it was somewhat of a small leap, but still a leap nonetheless. But he only had one catch for 10 yards, albeit, he also had that overthrow by Wigman. But overall, the only good thing that I took away from that was the secondary, and hopefully they blow out McNeese and, prove that they are still Texas A&M Aggies.
I agree. And just to touch on the defense just slightly, I feel like we didn't see necessarily bad things, but we didn't see what we thought we would see with this A&M core defensive
up front.
front.
Yeah.
Especially with Scorton and his, dare I say, lack of big plays and big, moves that he was supposed to just come in and just automatically start making at A&M, which, you can't just put it all on one guy. You've got three guys next to him that are all trying to do the same thing. They're all trying to get pressure on the quarterback and Leonard. And we did not see that. We didn't see a single sack. We got a few quarterback hurries, but we did not see a lot. And it kind of just goes to show that it's not just the offense. It's not just the defense. It was the whole team and the whole lack of synergy and the lack of playing together that I think ultimately just led them to shoot themselves in the foot. I don't think it was really a Notre Dame was a better team at the end of the day. They showed it, yes, but I don't think that that's really their identity. I think A&M just has to get their leg in the door and, just start to play better and with each other.
And again, it's just the first game of the season against the top team, so with all that being said, we'll see how A&M goes up from here, but there is only one way to go, and it's up from here, hopefully. So
absolutely. And now let's transition into maybe what some of our other sports are doing here in Aggieland. Let's talk about soccer. Or let's talk about their troubles more specifically.
I was getting all the notifications on my phone from the soccer team on Twitter. And I was like, we're tied against Baylor. And it's, the last tweet was like 15 minutes left to play. I'm like, hey, a 0-0 draw against Baylor, not bad. 86-minute goal. I'm like, no, bro, we can't. No.
Yeah, they definitely they dropped the ball on that one. It was a late goal by Baylor. I know there wasn't too many shots taken in this game. I know it was relatively, there's only 20 combined shots between both. Like that's not a high intense offense like game. That's just not how soccer looks. If you're only scoring one goal and shooting 20 between both.
Exactly, yeah.
And A&M only had 8 shots. Like it was a very low production offensive night. Only one of those was on goal. They basically only making Baylor play defense one real time, and it showed. And it's becoming a trend now with soccer. They had that 3-2 loss with Denver the week previously, and that was kind of the opposite. You had a lot of shots. You had 16 from Denver. You had 19 from A&M. Denver obviously got their number on that one, but it was still 7 shots to 6 on goal. Denver 7 to us 6. And you got to think, at the end of the day, that offense has to be to blame for some of this. I mean, it's not on that Aggie defense that we saw last year that, shut teams out front to start.
You have to apply pressure to the other team.
Exactly. It's got to go both ways, and it's not right now for A&M soccer. And I don't, there's still plenty of season left, just like football, but they got to get this going now. I mean, there hasn't been too many starts with multiple losses for Aggie soccer lately. They have been on the ball these past few years. We have not seen a bad season since COVID. So let's hope it can improve, and let's move on to some of our other sports. And let's talk about volleyball and
Hey, at least we're winning in volleyball.
their home.
Let's
Oh,
go.
yeah. So volleyball, just talk about their streak a little bit, Justin. Tell us what they're doing right.
It's very reminiscent of last year. Last year, we got to a great start. I want to say that was the first year of under Coach Jamie Morrison, very first year. And there's plenty of good things about that. Albeit, just like last year, these teams that we're playing against, pretty smaller schools.
Yeah, I mean, you've got an A&M Corpus matchup, and then you've got, TCU's your first big game, which is
I think
not
you're looking.
not TCU. My bad. You're seeing some better teams down the line, but it's just not. You're not starting off like you're starting off with A&M versus Notre Dame. It's definitely a lot different.
Although they're playing against smaller schools, they're doing their business. Though. They're not making it a close competition. They're winning almost every single set. The only set that they've dropped was against McNeese. It was their first one, and then the other three, it was complete wins. And so they're doing their job of not allowing these smaller teams to catch up to them. And I'm kind of fearing. Well, I don't want to bring it back to football, but it's like hopefully A&M football can also take the same page out of A&M volleyball and not play down to McNeese State's level or something like that.
Exactly. And just to go off of what I said previously, volleyball did play Baylor. That was a exhibition, and it wasn't a regular season game technically. But they did win 3-1, and that was a top 25 matchup.
Mm-hmm.
And super important when the next few games you're playing South Alabama, McNeese, A&M Corpus Christi, and then Texas State. Like it's not a very beefed up schedule. And past the A&M Invitational is when we're actually going to see, these big teams come here. And it's going to be Wisconsin, Texas. Missouri, Auburn. Like it starts right after our Invitational. And that's really, playing to your best bet until that point is the best thing you can do for this volleyball
It's gonna be all momentum.
season.
You're fixing all the little things. Also, it's like in basketball where if you're struggling or if you're on fire, you just keep firing or you keep shooting and you just want to see just one basket go in and one basket go in. It's the same thing in volleyball. With these wins, they keep stacking them wins. They keep getting these kills and stops. It all builds up for
It just propels them
momentum
forward.
and morale. Just how the team feeling overall.
Exactly.
And especially with I have my eye on that Texas game too. That's gonna be a really fun game at home.
Yeah, especially with how Texas finished last year. They went to the national championship, or did they win it?
They went. I think that's like back-to-back years. I want to say.
Yes, I believe you're right, and that's super impressive for them. But let's see if we can take that away. Let's see if we can kind of rain on that parade that they're having, because they're wanting a three-peat at this point. And I feel like with the new change in Morrison, I feel like it is possible to compete at the best level in this SEC now. Ask me 3 years ago, I wouldn't have told you much about volleyball, but now I'm fully invested in the squad. And so their next matchup will be against Texas State on September 6th.
Friday, I think.
Yes, so whenever this is coming out. But I believe that's all we have time for today. Thank y'all so much for listening, and tune in next week for the Home Turf Podcast.